Hey there, I'm Hallie, and any minute now we are expected to see Charlie Kirk's suspected killer facing a judge for the first time since the assassination of the conservative activist in Utah nearly a week ago. I want to show you the virtual hearing. It's not expected to be long. It hasn't started just yet. It's going to be pretty quick. Obviously, just boxes here, Zoom boxes, essentially. It's going to be to make sure that the suspect has an attorney and for the judge to read out the 7 charges just filed against him. And although the governor says Tyler Robinson, the suspect, has not been cooperating, documents released by officials today are revealing some significant new details. In one text thread we've just learned about today, Robinson's roommate, according to Robinson's mother, the two were romantic partners, says, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" Robinson responds, "I am. I'm sorry." In another thread released by officials, the roommate asks why, to which Robinson replies, "Why did I do it?" The roommate says, "Yeah." Robinson said, "I had enough of his hatred," presumably referring to Charlie Kirk, adding, "Some hate can't be negotiated out." Officials in Utah say they are now seeking the death penalty against the 22-year-old after laying out minute-by-minute details on how they say the attack played out. We're going to have more on that in just a couple of minutes. But first, I want to get to our team on this. Danny Savallo's here for the legal breakdown. But I want to start with Steve Patterson, who is live for us on the ground in Utah. Extraordinary details, Steve, revealed at this news conference not too long ago. Aggravated murder, obviously, is the primary charge here. That carries the capital count, essentially, why they are charging him and seeking the death penalty. And a lot of new details, especially in this text exchange with this roommate, right?
Yeah, the text exchange, but we can start at the top level even before that. So much detail, so many blanks filled in that we didn't know before this charging document came out. One of them being the apprehension of the suspect himself, that there was almost a collaboration between mother and father coming up with a plan on how to get their son to turn themselves in, starting with the mother. We didn't realize it was the mother who saw those FBI photos, recognized her son, got in contact with the father, both of them trying to reach out to their son. And it was the father hearing a description of the rifle who recognized this could be my kid, which led to Robinson turning himself in. And I believe we're going to go now to the hearing itself. Hallie.
At the conclusion of the hearing, for the first case, the court will take a recess and remind all those who are scheduled for the first appearance calendar to log back in 15 minutes after the court has taken a recess. As a general note, no electronic usage is allowed unless pre-approved. Any disruptions will be removed. To the jail, are we ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Calling case 251-403-576, State of Utah versus Tyler James Robinson. Could you state your name?
Tyler James Robinson.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Robinson. I'm Judge Graff. Mr. Skordas.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. You're probably already aware of my presence or why I'm here, but if not, I am not entering an appearance. I'm not counsel on this case. I'm working with the county to get counsel assigned, but we need you to allow for the appointment of counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Skordas. I want to go through the qualifications for indigency, but that is my intent, Mr. Skordas.
Very well.
And I thank you for being here. So, Mr. Robinson, you have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, the court can appoint an attorney to represent you. I have reviewed your declaration of financial status and find that you are indigent. I'm provisionally appointing a Rule 8 qualified attorney to represent you on your case, Mr. Robinson. Along with their filing of their appearance of counsel, the assigned attorneys must file declarations with the court that outline their qualifications under Rule 8 and under Rule 8B and Rule 8C for a counsel appointment in a case where death may be a sentencing option. I'm ordering that those declarations be filed prior to the next hearing date, which is set for September 29th at 10 a.m. Mr. Robinson, I also wish to inform you of your rights against self-incrimination. Anything that you say in court today could be used against you, and we want to protect your constitutional rights. Mr. Robinson, at this time, you will remain in custody without bail. Mr. Skordas, is there any other points that you wish to address?
No, thank you very much, Your Honor.
Turning to the state,
Yes, Your Honor. Chad Grunander for the state. I'm also joined, and they're listed as attendees, Ryan McBride, Lauren Hunt, David Sturgill, and Chris Ballard. We are the trial team on this case. I do have a few points I'd like to bring up with Your Honor. We have filed a pretrial protective order on behalf of Erica Kirk. We would ask the court to review that. It should be in your queue, Your Honor, and sign that.
Thank you. I have reviewed the pretrial protective order and will be issuing this pretrial protective order in favor of Erica Kirk. Is there any other business that we need to address today, counsel?
Just for the court's information, we did file just recently, within the last few minutes, a notice of intent to seek the death penalty that was filed by Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray. So that should be in the court's file. Lastly, I would just indicate to the court and to, at this point, Mr. Robinson, that we are prepared to collect all of the discovery in this matter and get that turned over to the defense as soon as possible. Rule 16 requires us to provide what we have relied on in charging the information and bringing these charges within 5 days once it's requested. So that'll be prepared to disseminate to the defense as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Grunander. Mr. Robinson, what I also want to do is you have the right to have the charges read that you stand charged of, and I wish to read those to you at this time. Thank you. Mr. Robinson, for count 1, aggravated murder, a capital felony in violation of Utah Code Annotated 76-5-202, in that on September 10th, 2025 in Utah County, the defendant, Tyler James Robinson, intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Charlie Kirk under the following circumstances. The defendant knowingly created a great risk of death to another individual other than Charlie Kirk and the defendant. Notice conviction of this offense may carry the death penalty or pursuant to Utah Code 76-3-207.7, a mandatory term of imprisonment for life without parole or an indeterminate term of not less than 25 years, that may be for life. Victim targeting enhancement in violation of Utah Code Annotated 76-3-203.14 sub 2. Tyler James Robinson intentionally selected Charlie Kirk because of Tyler James Robinson's belief or perception regarding Charlie Kirk's political expression. Notice, if the trier of fact finds beyond a reasonable doubt that the victim targeting enhancement applies, the sentencing judge or the Board of Pardons and Parole shall consider the defendant's selection of the victim as an aggravating factor. Violent offense committed in the presence of a child aggravating factor, the sentencing judge or the Board of Pardons and Parole shall consider as an aggravating factor in their deliberations that the defendant committed a violent criminal offense in the presence of a child. Count 2, felony discharge of a firearm causing serious bodily injury, a first-degree felony in violation of Utah Code Annotated 76-11-210 sub 2 and 3C, in that on September 10th, 2025 in Utah County, the defendant Tyler James Robinson discharged a firearm in the direction of Charlie Kirk, knowing or having reason to believe that Charlie Kirk may be endangered by the discharge of the firearm and that the act caused serious bodily injury to Charlie Kirk. Victim targeting enhancement in violation of Utah Code Annotated 76-3-203.14 sub 2. Tyler James Robinson intentionally selected Charlie Kirk because Tyler James Robinson's belief or perception regarding Charlie Kirk's political expression. Notice, if the trier of fact finds beyond a reasonable doubt that the victim targeting enhancement applies, the sentencing judge or the Board of Pardons and Parole shall consider the defendant's selection of the victim as an aggravating factor. Violent offense committed in the presence of a child aggravating factor. The sentencing judge or the Board of Pardons and Parole shall consider an aggravating factor in their deliberations that the defendant, committed a violent offense in the presence of a child. Count 3, obstruction of justice, a second-degree felony in violation of Utah Code Annotated 76-8-306 sub 2, in that on September 10th, 2025 in Utah County, the defendant Tyler James Robinson, with intent to hinder, delay, or prevent the investigation, apprehension, prosecution, conviction, or pursuant to any person regarding conduct that constitutes a criminal offense, conceal or remove the firearm used to shoot Charlie Kirk, and the conduct that constitutes an offense would be a capital felony or a first-degree felony. Count 4, obstruction of justice, a second-degree felony in violation of Utah Code 76-8-306 sub 2, in that on or about September 11th, 2025 in Utah County, the defendant, Tyler James Robinson, with an intent to hinder, delay, or prevent the investigation, apprehension, prosecution, conviction, or punishment of any person regarding conduct that constitutes a criminal offense, destroyed, concealed, or removed the clothing he wore during the shooting, and the conduct that constitutes an offense would be a capital felony or first-degree felony. Count 5, tampering with a witness, a third-degree felony in violation of Utah Code Annotated 76-8-508, in that on or about September 10th, 2025 in Utah County, the defendant, Tyler James Robinson, believed that an official proceeding or investigation was pending or about to be instituted, or intended to prevent an official proceeding or investigation, and attempted to induce or otherwise cause his roommate to withhold testimony, information, a document, or an item, to wit, directing his roommate to delete incriminating text messages. Count 6, tampering with a witness, a third-degree felony in violation of Utah Code Annotated 76-8-508, in that on or about September 11th, 2025 in Utah County, the defendant, Tyler James Robinson, believed that an official proceeding or investigation was pending or about to be instituted, or intended to prevent an official proceeding or investigation, and attempted to induce or otherwise cause his roommate to withhold testimony or information, to wit, directing his roommate to stay silent if the police questioned the roommate. Count 7, violent offense committed in the presence of a child, a Class A misdemeanor in violation of Utah Code Annotated 76-3-203.10 sub 2 and 76-3-203.14 sub 3a little double I, in that on or about September 10th, 2025 in Utah County, the defendant, Tyler James Robinson, committed criminal homicide in the physical presence of a child younger than 14 years of age, with knowledge that a child was present and that may have been seen or heard the commission of the criminal homicide. Victim targeting enhancement in violation of Utah Code Annotated 76-3-203.14 sub 2, Tyler James Robinson intentionally selected Charlie Kirk because of Tyler James Robinson's belief or perception regarding Charlie Kirk's political expression. That concludes reading the information. Mr. Robinson, this case is set for September 29th at 10 a.m. It will be a waiver hearing, and I will be the judge assigned to this case. Mr. Robinson, I invite you to join us at that time. Is there anything further, counsel?
No, Your Honor, we'll have counsel appointed by then. Thank you.
Mr. Gurander, anything further?
One item, just for clarification, Your Honor, the hearing on the 29th, is that in person or WebEx?
Thank you. That is a great question. It will be via WebEx.
Okay. Thank you, Judge.
All right. I want to thank all parties for being here, and this concludes this hearing at this time. Court is in recess.
All right.
You have been watching that court hearing for the man suspected of shooting and killing Charlie Kirk last week on a campus in Utah. You saw the suspected assassin, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, there, not speaking, wearing what appeared to be some kind of green vest, as the judge read out the 7 charges against him, including, of course, aggravated murder. The state making clear that they are seeking the death penalty and putting in place, the judge did, a protective order, apparently at the request of the state, for Erica Kirk, Charlie Kirk's widow. I want to bring in Danny Savalos. I want to bring back Steve Patterson, who's live for us in Utah. Danny, as we noted, that was a virtual and fairly quick court proceeding here. September 29th, that'll be the next one for Tyler Robinson.
These hearings are quick anyway, and that's before court started doing virtual appearances where the suspect doesn't even need to leave the jail. In fact, it might have even been shorter. Normally, a defendant will waive the reading of the formal charges or the indictment, but I suspect that in a case of this much national interest, the judge just wanted to make extra certain there was no doubt that the defendant was informed of the charges against him. That avoids him having to even speak. It makes it cleaner, although it adds just a few minutes onto what could otherwise be a matter of seconds in some cases.
And is the 29th when we would expect to hear Robinson enter a plea? He, it sounds like, does not have an attorney yet, although one will be appointed.
Yes, in all likelihood, and this is no surprise for a crime of this magnitude. Given what little we know about him, it's unlikely he would have the funds to pay for his own private counsel. So no surprise. The only real question is whether or not he'll get the public defender, which I suspect he will not. He's more likely to get appointed private counsel. And here's the key. They have to be death penalty qualified. That requires a ton of extra training. And people who handle those capital cases are almost always court appointed. It's very rare that a capital murder case involves a defendant who's well-heeled enough to pay for private counsel.
Noting here, too, some of the paperwork is just into us on that protective order that the court finds the defendant represents a credible threat to the physical safety of that person here being Erica Kirk. Danny, stand by for a second. I want to go back to Steve Patterson here. And, Steve, it has been a remarkable series of developments over the course of the last several hours as state officials, the Utah attorney there earlier in the day described, and the charging documents, some of these probable cause documents showed step by step, almost minute by minute in some instances, how they closed in on this 22-year-old as their suspect.
They did. And in doing so, we got the TikTok, we got the charges. Also, these, the exchange of text messages between Robinson and his roommate. These are details that we simply didn't have before. One thing that sort of gels with what we saw in the text messages, this exchange, again, before and after between Robinson and roommate, who believed to be romantically linked, is how cognizant and lucid Robinson appears. And I would say that for looking at this video, although unblinking, so unblinking and eerily at times that it almost appears like the video is frozen. Just want to comment a little bit more on the physical appearance of Robinson, appearing over WebEx on video. Appears to be wearing what is described to me as a safety smock. We know he's on a special hold, right? They're going to hold him there in a separate unit before they evaluate his mental health, before they put him in maybe a more different location, a more general location. They do that as a matter of procedure, right? But it is sort of interesting. He did say one thing, which was his name, which was stated clearly and firmly. And again, I want to say gels with sort of what we saw in that exchange of text messages, because he's talking to his roommate, who clearly appears to have no idea, the roommate, what is going on, or that he is the suspected shooter. And yet he's sort of talking a TikTok of what he's done and why he's done it, and admitting to do it, essentially shocking this roommate through these series of exchanges, which sort of gels with his physical appearance today. Obviously, we also heard during the hearing the Utah County following the course of action to introduce the death penalty as well. That was filed as this was being read in court. So definitely some developments here today. And just the amount of information that we got, the blanks that were filled in.
That's right.
Not only that, but also on the apprehension, the involvement of the mother as well, and sort of bringing him in. And also the physical evidence, the DNA found on the actual trigger of the rifle, which was tied to not only what was found on the screwdriver, but also the towel used to wrap the rifle. So an extraordinary amount of information that we got, especially with this charging document that's now in.
What's also clear from these text exchanges laid out, Steve, is that Robinson had no intention of being caught. And I say that because he said he had hoped to die of old age with this being his secret, according to what the state had laid out in this text exchange. Almost seemed panicked when describing trying to go back to return to retrieve the rifle that he allegedly shot Charlie Kirk with, not being able to do so when essentially caught out by his parents when his parents approached him and said, you know, we think this may have been you, tried to get in touch with him, tried to reach out. The state says that Robinson suggested or implied that he may try to take his own life here. So you can get a sense of his mindset, at least based on some of these text exchanges and what law enforcement has laid out over the course of some of these documents here. All of it, as we should note, these are the state charges here. It's possible federal charges could come.
Yeah, federal charges possible. One notable sort of omission is we didn't see any federal officials. We don't know if federal charges will be filed, although it's heavily implied that they will. You know, one thing also is sort of the level of deceit, both with the parents. The father did something that sounded very clever. It was heard the description of the rifle that had been described by authorities, federal authorities, state authorities, and that he assumed, you know, obviously with the pictures of Robinson himself on camera at the university, assuming this is his son, tried to get in contact with his son, trying to ask, hey, could you send me a picture of the rifle that I gave you? And of course, the son sort of ghosting him, seeming to imply, again, involvement. And also about the rifle, there was a lot of investigative work to try to figure out, was the rifle traceable? Was it bought legally, illegally? Would have been hard to trace, we now know, because this was essentially a family heirloom, something that's common in hunting families, passed down from grandfather to father to son, and that was the case here. So again, much more stark relief that we're seeing this case in, Hallie.
That's right. Robinson also telling his mother he had been out sick, had stayed home sick over the course of the 2 days that she had inquired about. Steve, I know you're going to stand by for us later on as we get potentially more on this. Danielle, let me go back to you here briefly because Steve laid out what could come next here. Obviously, the death penalty that the state is seeking. What about this protective order for Erica Kirk? Is that something that is typical in the course of an investigation like this, a prosecution like this?
Sure, yes. As to prospective victims, it's usually not entered against someone's spouse, but it makes sense here because this is not some street crime or a crime of passion. This is someone who was apparently, whether by this defendant or not, targeted. And so it makes sense to say, well, close members of the family may also be targeted as well. So it's not unusual for judges to enter those kinds of protective orders as sua sponte on their own or in response to a request from the prosecution.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. We have been talking now about the developing news that has occurred over the course of the last several hours, with prosecutors laying out in detail how they say Tyler Robinson carried out this murder. We're going to play a big portion of that in case you missed it earlier. We want to basically roll that tape so you can hear for yourself how the state laid this out. Take a listen.
These are the allegations. On September 10th, 2025, at approximately 12:23 p.m., Charlie Kirk was shot and killed while speaking to a large crowd on the campus of Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. Police found the suspected murder weapon, a bolt-action .30-06 rifle, nearby. Over the next approximately 33 hours, police conducted a manhunt for the shooter until the evening of September 11th, 2025, when Tyler James Robinson surrendered to police at the Washington County Sheriff's Office. DNA consistent with Robinson was found on the rifle's trigger. After shooting Mr. Kirk, Robinson hid the gun, discarded the clothing he wore when he fired the rifle, and told his roommate to delete incriminating text messages and not talk to police. Children were present at the time of the shooting. The shooting. Turning Point USA, a nonprofit organization founded in 2012 by Charlie Kirk, organized a public outdoor event to be held at noon on September 10th, 2025 at UVU. The event was the first in a series of similar events to be held at college campuses nationwide. Mr. Kirk is a well-known conservative activist, famous for these type of events, where he discusses various political issues and debates with audience members. His events and comments have garnered a significant number of supporters and drawn the ire of many who disagree with his political views. The event at UVU was announced far in advance and garnered significant publicity and interest. Consequently, several hundred people attended. Mr. Kirk was interacting with a crowd before the event officially got underway. Then, at approximately noon, Mr. Kirk seated himself under a portable canopy behind a table and microphone. He began speaking to the crowd and fielding questions from attendees, a format Mr. Kirk commonly used at his events. Mr. Kirk allowed his questioners to approach a microphone positioned directly in front of him. Mr. Kirk's team members were very close to him on his right and left, as well as some behind his canopy and others at various close locations near him. The large crowd surrounded Mr. Kirk on three sides. Temporary metal fencing separated attendees from Mr. Kirk by only a matter of feet. Directly above and behind Mr. Kirk was the UVU Hall of Flags, an indoor walkway spanning several hundred feet with floor-to-ceiling glass windows which overlooked the plaza where Mr. Kirk was seated. People were in the walkway at the time of the shooting. Approximately 15 minutes into the event, Mr. Kirk was answering a question about mass shootings by transgender individuals when a gunshot rang out. The bullet struck Mr. Kirk in the neck. He slumped to the ground almost immediately. The bullet's trajectory passed closely to several other individuals beside Mr. Kirk, including the questioner who was standing directly in front of Mr. Kirk. Children were visible near Mr. Kirk's stage when he was shot. Mr. Kirk was rushed to a nearby hospital where he was declared deceased. The medical examiner's report is still pending. So UVU surveillance. So at the moment of the shot, a UVU police officer was watching the crowd from an elevated vantage point. As soon as he heard the shot, he began to scan the area for threats. Believing the shot came from a rifle because of its sound, he looked for potential sniper positions. He noted a roof area approximately 160 yards away from Mr. Kirk as a potential shooting position and rushed there to look for evidence. The suspected shooting position is adjacent to an open, publicly accessible walkway. To access the suspected location, a person must climb over a railing and then drop to the roof only slightly below. The UV officer climbed over the railing and down onto the roof. He then walked to the suspected shooting position and confirmed a clear shooting corridor between the position and Mr. Kirk's seat. He also noticed markings in the gravel rooftop, consistent with a sniper having lain on the roof, impressions in the gravel potentially left by the elbows, knees, and feet of a person in a prone shooting position. Police reviewed surveillance from the camera covering the roof and discovered that it recorded an individual dressed in dark clothing cross the railing from the public walkway and drop onto the roof at approximately 12:15 p.m. Although the individual moved out of the camera's view for a short time, the camera again captured the individual running across the roof and then low crawling to the area the UVU officer recognized as where the suspected sniper had dropped into a prone shooting position. After a short time, which matches the known time of the shot, the individual arose and ran across the roof to the northeast. This discovery led to an intensive review of UVU surveillance recordings to attempt to track and identify the suspect. Surveillance revealed the following. At approximately 11:51 a.m., the suspect entered campus from the north. He is seen wearing a black shirt with an American flag in the center, a dark baseball cap, and large sunglasses. Throughout the surveillance, the suspect keeps his head down and rarely raises his head enough to get a clear image of his face. As he proceeds across the campus, he is seen walking with an unusual gait. The suspect walks with very little bending in his right leg, consistent with a rifle being hidden in his pants. This unusual gait continues until the suspect is seen crossing the railway off the open walkway and onto the roof, where he leaves the camera's view. A camera later captures the suspect as he runs across the roof to the suspected shooting position. Immediately after the shot was fired, a camera captures the suspect running across the roof carrying an item whose shape is consistent with a rifle. The suspect is then seen climbing down from the roof. He appears to drop the item he was carrying as he hits the ground in a controlled fall. He then picks up the item and runs toward the northeast end of campus. Expanded crime scene investigation. Law enforcement officers followed the suspect's escape path to the northeast end of campus, where they believe the suspect left campus and entered a wooded area. In that wooded area, investigators found a bolt-action rifle wrapped in a towel. The rifle contained 1 spent round and 3 unspent rounds. This is consistent with the facts officers observed at the time of and immediately after the shootings. No shell casings were found on the roof, suggesting a bolt action rather than an auto-loading weapon, and only a single round was fired. Each round in the rifle contained an etched inscription as follows. The fired cartridge was etched, "No Tice's bulge, OWO, what's this?" The second cartridge that was again not spent, the last 3 were not spent, were not fired. The second, "Hey fascist, catch," with arrow symbols. The third cartridge, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." The fourth cartridge, "If you read this, you are gay," LMAO. The rifle, ammunition rounds, and towel were sent for forensic processing. DNA consistent with defendant was found on the trigger, other parts of the rifle, the fired cartridge casing, 2 of the 3 unfired cartridges, and the towel. Law enforcement was unable to immediately locate the shooter, so they published photos of the shooter from the UVU surveillance cameras and asked for the public's help to identify him. Meanwhile, law enforcement continued to try to identify the shooter through other means. The Washington County investigation. On the evening of September 11th, 2025, as law enforcement continued their investigation, Tyler James Robinson went to the Washington County Sheriff's Office with his parents and a family friend to turn himself in. Robinson's mother stated that the following to police. On September 11th, 2025, the day after the shooting, Robinson's mother saw the photo of the shooter in the news and thought the shooter looked like her son. Robinson's mother called her son and asked him where he was. He said he was at home sick and that he had also been at home sick on September 10th. Robinson's mother expressed concern to her husband that the suspect shooter looked like Robinson. Robinson's father agreed. Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, Robinson had become more political and had started to lean more to the left, becoming more pro-gay and trans rights oriented. She stated that Robinson began to date his roommate, a biological male who was transitioning genders. This resulted in several discussions with family members, but especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views. In one conversation before the shooting, Robinson mentioned that Charlie Kirk would be holding an event at UVU, which Robinson said was a stupid venue for the event. Robinson accused Kirk of spreading hate. Robinson's father reported that when his wife showed him the surveillance image of the suspected shooter in the news, he agreed that it looked like their son. He also believed that the rifle that police suspected the shooter used matched a rifle that was given to his son as a gift. As a result, Robinson's father contacted his son and asked him to send a photo of the rifle. Robinson did not respond. However, Robinson's father spoke on the phone with Robinson. Robinson implied that he planned to take his own life. Robinson's parents were able to convince him to meet at their home. As they discussed the situation, Robinson implied that he was the shooter and stated that he couldn't go to jail and just wanted to end it. When asked why he did it, Robinson explained there is too much evil and the guy, referring to Charlie Kirk, spreads too much hate. They talked about Robinson turning himself in and convinced Robinson to speak with a family friend who is a retired deputy sheriff. At Robinson's father's request, the family friend met with Robinson and his parents and convinced Robinson to turn himself in. The family friend spoke to police and reported telling Robinson that it would be best if he brought all evidence with him to the sheriff's office to avoid police having to search his parents' home. The friend also asked Robinson if he had any clothes that were related to what he did. Robinson replied that he had disposed of the clothes in different areas. The roommate. Police interviewed Robinson's roommate, a biological male who was involved in a romantic relationship with Robinson. The roommate told police that the roommate received messages from Robinson about the shooting, and he did provide those messages to police. On September 10th, 2025, the roommate received a text message from Robinson which said, "Drop what you're doing. Look under my keyboard." The roommate looked under the keyboard and found a note that stated, quote, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." Police found a photograph of this note. The following text exchange, then took place. After reading the note, the roommate responded, "What? You're joking, right?" Robinson, "I am still okay, my love, but I'm stuck in Orem for a little while longer yet. Shouldn't be long until I can come home, but I gotta grab my rifle still. To be honest, I had hoped to keep this secret till I died of old age. I am sorry to involve you." Roommate, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" Robinson, I am. I'm sorry." Roommate, "I thought they caught the person." Robinson, "No, they grabbed some crazy old dude, then interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from my drop point shortly after, but most of that side of town got locked down. It's quiet, almost enough to get out, but there's one vehicle lingering." Roommate, "Why?" Robinson, "Why did I do it?" Roommate, "Yeah." Robinson, "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. If I am able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence. Going to attempt to retrieve it again. Hopefully they have moved on. I haven't seen anything about them finding it." Roommate, "How long have you been planning this?" Robinson, "A bit over a week, I believe. I can get close to it, but there is a squad car parked right by it." I think they already swept that spot, but I don't want to chance it. Robinson again. I'm wishing I had circled back and grabbed it as soon as I got to my vehicle. I'm worried what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. IDEK if it's had a serial number, but it wouldn't trace to me. I worry about prints. I had to leave it in a bush where I changed outfits. Didn't have the ability or time to bring it with. I might have to abandon it and hope they don't find prints. How the F will I explain losing it to my old man? Only thing I left was the rifle wrapped in a towel. Remember how I was engraving bullets? The F in messages are mostly a big meme. If I see notice bulge UWU on Fox News, I might have a stroke, all right. I'm going to have to leave it. That really effing sucks. Judging from today, I'd say Grandpa's gun does just fine, IDK. I think that was a $2K dollar scope. Wink, wink. Robinson again. Delete this exchange. Again, Robinson. My dad wants photos of the rifle. He says Grandpa wants to know who has what. The feds released a photo of the rifle, and it is very unique. He's calling me, RN. Not answering. Robinson. Since Trump got into office, my dad has been pretty diehard MAGA. Robinson, I'm going to turn myself in willingly. One of my neighbors here is a deputy for the sheriff. Again, you are all I worry about, love. That came from Robinson. Roommate, I'm much more worried about you. Robinson, don't talk to the media, please. Don't take any interviews or make any comments. If any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and stay silent. The search for Robinson's residence. Police executed a search warrant on Robinson's residence. During that search, police discovered a shell casing with etchings like the etchings found on the shells in the rifle near UVU. Police also found several target boards with bullet holes in Robinson's home. Now, as I stated in the beginning, when I read those allegations, these are allegations. And like the evidence set forth in this statement, those allegations, what you've heard from the media, even from state and federal officials, has not been tested in the crucible of a jury trial.
You have been listening to Jeff Gray, the Utah County attorney, earlier laying out those minute-by-minute details on how they caught the man accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk. You saw the court hearing for suspect Tyler Robinson live before that. That was that virtual hearing. As prosecutors say, they will seek the death penalty. Robinson will remain in jail, no possibility of bail. He'll be in court again in just about 2 weeks. We're going to keep an eye on any developments on that front. But we've also got a lot of other headlines to get to, which will sneak in right after a quick break, including why the serious charges against Luigi Mangione are now dismissed. Not all of them, but some, and what's next in the case against him. Plus, the NBC News investigation into what may be a fatal flaw in Tesla's autopilot system. The life or death moment caught on camera when we're back in just a sec. Also tonight, a major blow to prosecutors in Manhattan after a judge dropped the state's terror charges against the man accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO. Take a look here. Luigi Mangione, that's him, obviously in the beige jumpsuit. He's leaving court in his first appearance in months, really since February. The judge, in a written decision, says Mangione was clearly hostile toward UHC and the healthcare industry in general, but that it doesn't mean Mangione's goal was to intimidate and coerce a civilian population. That's a quote. You see it there. When Mangione allegedly shot and killed CEO Brian Thompson last December right in Midtown Manhattan. The judge says the evidence behind the terror charges simply is not legally sufficient. Now, to be clear, he still faces other charges. The Manhattan DA's office says it respects the decision, and it will move forward with those other charges, including, of course, second-degree murder. Mangione has pleaded not guilty. He's also facing separate charges in the state of Pennsylvania where police caught him. He's facing charges at the federal level as well. So to be clear, it's not like Mangione is getting out of jail, at least not right now. His supporters were appearing in and outside court today. Watch this.
What do we want?
Free healthcare!
When do we want it?
Now!
And if we don't get it,
shut it down!
A scene there outside court. You see some of these folks, they're dressed in green. So that's the color of the Luigi character in Mario Brothers. You see some people in free Luigi shirts, etc. Stephanie Gosk is following all of this for us from New York.
Hey there, Hallie. So this was something of a surprise in the courtroom. We were talking amongst ourselves before the hearing began, thinking it was going to be brief and boring, and then it turned out to be anything but that. This decision was definitely a surprise. These are the most serious charges that Luigi Mangione faced in the state case against him, including a murder in the first degree, both of them connected to terrorism. That murder in the first degree would have had a mandatory sentence of life in prison with no parole. That's now been tossed out. Is he still facing serious charges? He absolutely is in that state case. 9 charges, including murder in the second degree, which carries a sentence of 25 years to life. So obviously not as bad as a mandatory life sentence, but also still very serious. He is also facing a federal case as well. And in that federal case, there is a murder count that could carry the death penalty. So why did this judge throw out the terrorism charges? Well, it's interesting because the judge in his decision said that while it certainly appears that Mangione was driven out of a hatred towards the health insurance industry, the prosecution, the judge said, did not provide sufficient evidence to show that his intent was to intimidate or coerce the civilian population. And that was really the threshold to get a terrorism charge. Where does all of this go next? Well, we still don't have trial dates for either the federal or state cases here in New York City. We do have another court date in that state case for December 1st, and they're expected to discuss a whole bunch of issues surrounding the evidence and the constitutionality of how it was acquired. Hallie?
Stephanie Goss, thank you very much in New York for us. Also tonight, the head of the FBI says as far as he's seen, there's not credible information that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to anyone other than himself. That was one of the notable headlines coming out of Director Kash Patel, who was here in Washington on Capitol Hill earlier today, getting into shouting matches with lawmakers at some point, as the White House is facing more pressure to release more Epstein files. And they're facing some criticism from survivors and others over that prison transfer of Ghislaine Maxwell. She's Epstein's convicted co-conspirator. We're going to play some of these spicy moments. This is Patel. This is Senator Adam Schiff, for example. I want to play it.
You want the American people to believe that? Do you think they're stupid?
No. I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of inmates.
Not in the weeds?
What I am doing is protecting this country, providing historic reform, and combating the weaponization of intelligence by the likes of you. You are a political buffoon at best.
Patel saying, obviously, he was not involved, he says, in Maxwell's move. The Bureau of Prisons has not confirmed why she was transferred. Tom Winter was monitoring much of this hearing today, and he's got more here.
Well, Hallie, there were some softer sides of this hearing today before the Senate Judiciary Committee when Senator Klobuchar of Minnesota had a heartfelt discussion about what her state has been through here over the last 6 months. We had the recent targeted killings of Minnesota lawmakers, and we've also had the targeted attack at a Catholic school, at a Catholic mass, the first week of school for those school children just a couple of weeks ago. And really a moment back and forth where the FBI Director Kash Patel, who was in the hot seat today, expressed his condolences and did promise to raise Senator Klobuchar's concerns with the president about his tone recently involving some of these targeted attacks. There was that. And then there was, as you alluded to, the drama between two specific senators, Cory Booker and Adam Schiff of California. A lot of vitriol there, a lot of back and forth between the two. And Kash Patel is not somebody who, of course, is going to be sitting up there taking the incoming, if you will, from members of Congress without firing back on his own. That's just not his style, and that's not the way that it's been. Obviously, people can judge the tenor and tone of those discussions. But there was some news today and a couple of recent matters that are probably certainly worth discussing and sharing. On the most immediate front, in the shooting of Charlie Kirk, the FBI director said that there was a Discord chat room. That's a gaming platform online where apparently 20 individuals were chatting about this, including Robinson himself. And so that's something that the FBI director says they're going to be looking into. Who are those 20 people? What did they know? What did they hear? What was said? What was the discussion there? So they're going to be focusing on that. And then you knew Jeffrey Epstein was going to come up in that investigation. The FBI director today very clearly saying there were no other individuals that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked young girls to for the purposes of sexual abuse. Very definitive there. Brought up the fact, this was a kind of buried, if you missed it, in a OPR Justice Department report about the initial investigation, talking how limited those search warrants were that were filed in the Jeffrey Epstein case as part of the investigation leading up to that plea deal that we now all know has been such a topic of controversy, pointing out that because they were so narrow, they are a little bit limited in the things that they can go back and look at from an evidence standpoint. But based on what he says he's seen, there's no evidence of any other men that these girls were trafficked to. So that was some new information today, particularly the why component of it. He'll be back in front of Congress tomorrow, in front of the House of Representatives. I'm sure there will be more fireworks then, and hopefully for all of us, a little bit more information from the FBI director as well. Hallie.
Tom Winter, thank you very much for that. You've got President Trump in just the last maybe 45 minutes or so landing in the UK. He is now the first U.S. president set to be honored with not one but 2 state visits to that country. Tomorrow, the UK is going to roll out the red carpet big time. Windsor Castle. Here's the president. He's getting off the plane. Obviously, it is late over there across the pond. Windsor Castle is going to host the biggest military ceremony for a foreign leader in recent history. There's going to be a big fancy banquet with the royal family, a military flyover of F-35s, both British and American, procession in a horse-drawn carriage, etc. You're looking at some of his visit from back in 2019. A lot of pageantry, right? There is going to be a lot of that, but there's also a lot at stake on the world stage right now. Not with just whatever economic and trade deals the president and the UK prime minister could work out. But keep in mind that Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing speculation on his own part about his own political future, whether or not he gets pushed out. I want to get to Gabe Gutierrez, who is live for us tonight outside Buckingham Palace with all of this. Set the table, because tomorrow morning, our time, U.S. time, East Coast, West Coast, this is when things will really be rolling.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. Look, you're right. It is late here across the pond. And the president arriving here a short time ago, as you mentioned. He's spending the night in Winston House, the U.S. ambassador's residence here in London. But you're right. All the pomp and pageantry will happen tomorrow at Windsor Castle. But as you said, Prime Minister Starmer facing a lot of controversy here domestically. And also just several days ago, far-right anti-immigration protests here in London, drawing more than 100,000 people, according to police. And this all comes amid all the talk about President Trump's tariffs and also the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. But tomorrow would be a charm offensive from the royal family. President Trump, widely known to be starstruck by the royals, and King Charles and Queen Camilla will greet him at Windsor Castle. But he'll be kept largely away from the protests here in London, as well as outside the castle. Security is very high over there. And then on Thursday, the president meeting the prime minister at his country residence, Chequers, where they're expected to focus more on policy on that day, perhaps in business investments, cooperation on AI and nuclear energy. So very high stakes meeting, as you said, historic. This is the second state visit that the President Trump is getting. Never happened before, Hallie.
All right. Gabe Gutierrez, enjoy the van ride up to Chequers. It's a little tight, a little windy, so hold on. Appreciate you, Gabe.
I bet you know.
Also tonight, an NBC News investigation, really interesting one here, revealing a potentially dangerous issue with the autopilot function on some Teslas. The technology seems to not recognize lowered gates and flashing lights on train tracks. The ones, obviously, if you're going through it, they signal, hey, train's coming, stop. This has led, according to our reporting, to a series of close calls, including for one driver who shared this video showing his Tesla going towards a moving train. Didn't stop. He slams on the brakes. He's paying attention, so he ends up slamming on the brakes. Our Tom Costello talked to that Tesla owner, and believe it or not, NBC's cameras were rolling when it happened again. Look at this. Every angle, drone overhead, cameraman on the street, even the car's own dash cam. That's it, the moment that the driver had to brake hard to avoid his car driving itself through the crossing just seconds before that train rolled by. Let me play you the reaction to this moment. Look at this.
Well, there you go.
You got to note Tesla did not respond to an NBC News request for comment. Let me bring in Tom Costello, who's joining us now. And this seems to be pretty specific, Tom, to the nexus, at least based on our reporting, to this issue of train track crossings, right? That thing in particular. What's going on?
Yeah, so this is when the Tesla, specifically he has a Model Y, when it is in the full safe driving mode. Now, keep in mind, Tesla and all experts say there is no such thing right now as fully autonomous driving, right? It's assisted driving. But this is an incredible package. I mean, I drove with this gentleman you saw there, and boy, the car really did seem to drive itself. But when it approaches that train intersection, the railroad intersection, the lights are flashing, the arm comes down, and suddenly it didn't stop. It didn't slow. He had to slam on the brakes, and he said it's the third time it's happened so far this year. So we've done our own research to look into, well, how widespread of a problem is this? And NBC News has identified at least 7 other individuals who say the exact same thing happened to them, and then about 40 online examples of similar mishaps or similar close calls. We reached out to Tesla. Tesla is declining to comment, or actually has not responded to our request for comment. But it is important to note that Tesla always says you cannot essentially hand over control of the vehicle to the autonomous pilot. You've got to always stay alert and be willing and able to jump in quickly and apply the brakes if necessary in any situation.
Is this on the radar of regulators yet, Tom?
Yeah, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration tells us, in fact, that it is aware of the situation. Here's what they say to us. We are aware of the incidents and have been in communication with the manufacturer, that's Tesla. The agency continuously analyzes consumer complaints to determine whether a potential vehicle safety defect trend actually exists. Here is the challenge, according to the experts, and I talked to one AI automotive expert at MIT. The software has to learn, learn from other examples. Okay, what is a railroad stop? What does it look like? Well, there are dozens, maybe actually hundreds of examples of railroad crossings across the country. There's not one size fits all. And so that may be part of the challenge here, that the software takes a long time to learn from all the various examples around the country. But in the meantime, the advice is if you have this FSD in your Tesla, great program, by the way, but if you have it, keep your eyes on the road, especially when you come up to a railroad crossing.
Always be paying attention. Tom Costello, thank you very much for bringing us that investigation. More to come, I know, tonight over on Nightly. Appreciate that. That does it for us for this hour. Thank you, as always, for watching on a very busy news day. More coverage picks up right now. We are coming on the air tonight with the suspected killer of Charlie Kirk appearing virtually in court for the very first time, with prosecutors seeking the death penalty in their case against him. It's coming as we get a first look now at some text messages that officials say he allegedly sent his roommate and romantic partner right after the attack. We've got to look at those in just a second. Plus, overseas, thousands of people racing to try to get out of Gaza City as Israeli troops launch new attacks. How the IDF is defending the operation as a new UN report suggests Israel is committing genocide. Then a critical moment today for the economy, critical week really for the economy, why the Fed is expected to cut interest rates tomorrow and what we're learning about mortgage rates. Plus, why the only chance for the Menendez brothers to get out of prison anytime soon is now in the hands of California Governor Gavin Newsom after a key decision today. We'll get into it. Plus, why some people are pretty worried about their retirement money up in Rhode Island, what we know about one group getting denied access to their own retirement funds. We've got to look at that coming up later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and in just the last half hour or so, you watched it live in just the last hour, we should say, Charlie Kirk's suspected killer facing a judge in that virtual hearing for the first time since Kirk's assassination at a campus event in Utah nearly a week ago now. You see it here at this is, again, virtual, fairly quick. It was only a few minutes long. They talked about the lawyer situation. The judge read out the 7 charges just filed against the man you see there on your right, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, who did not speak much, very, very little, but simply stated his name to the judge.
Could you state your name?
Tyler James Robinson.
So that's it from him. No plea. That is not expected until later in the month, September 29th. That is the next court hearing. It comes as we have learned quite a bit from some of these probable cause documents that officials have filed. The governor says Robinson has not been cooperating. We are getting more information released by officials with some of these new details, especially in a text message exchange between Robinson and his roommate, described by Robinson's mother as his romantic partner here. And you can see it. The roommate says, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" Robinson then says, according to these official documents, I'm sorry." In another thread, the roommate at one point asks why, to which Robinson replies, "Why did I do it?" The roommate says, "Yeah." Robinson says, "I had enough of his hatred," presumably referring to Kirk, saying some hate can't be negotiated out. All of it as we are looking ahead to what happens next in this case, in this investigation. We now know there's a protective order in place for Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty and have described in minute detail how they narrowed in on Robinson and how this attack played out. Danny Savalos is here to talk about what this all means from a legal perspective. But I want to start with Steve Patterson on the ground in Utah. And to your point, Steve, and we talked about it as we watched that virtual hearing live together, he's now been charged. He is obviously remains in jail. No possibility of bail right now, right?
Charge, remains in jail, no possibility of bail. You said it right. We also got the paperwork for the death penalty filing, the status hearing as well. The next, as you mentioned, hearing in this case scheduled for the 29th. But keep in mind, this is a suspect without the retention of an attorney yet. This is a process that is going to take some time before we get near anything resembling a trial. Meanwhile, we did hear so much more detail from the charging document, but also from this news conference, starting with this being a tragedy. I want to play for you the county attorney who started this off. Listen to this.
The murder of Charlie Kirk is an American tragedy. Charlie Kirk was murdered while engaging in one of our most sacred and cherished American rights, the bedrock of our democratic republic, the free exchange of ideas in a search for truth, understanding, and a more perfect union.
And we learned so much more from this news conference, so much more in this charging document that we didn't know before today, including not only the method of apprehension, but that the mother and the father sort of worked together, were communicating to try to get Robinson to turn himself in. More about the DNA found at the scene, the evidence on the trigger of the rifle matched the screwdriver found on the scene, matched the towel that was used to wrap that rifle. More, obviously with this exchange of text messages, that there was witness tampering, that Robinson, according to authorities, tried to get his roommate to be silent, to not talk to authorities, to not talk to the media, and that the roommate, because we didn't know what necessarily the level of involvement with the roommate was, who was romantically linked, apparently, because the roommate was shocked to find this out, that they were talking during text messages after this happened, and the roommate had no idea. So obviously an incredible amount of detail today, an incredible sort of darkness surrounding this hearing. Hallie.
The other question that has come up, right, is could anybody else be charged potentially in connection with this? And the Utah County attorney wouldn't really get into that today. We do know, though, from the Utah governor, Spencer Cox, he has suggested that the roommate, the romantic partner, is very much cooperative with law enforcement and with officials. But now there's this spotlight on this Discord chat, basically, this online chat that Robinson had with like a bunch of people. The FBI director said earlier today, as you point out, like that's all in the ether. That's all in the mix. They're trying to run all that down.
Yeah, so, and Kash Patel mentioned this as well, the Washington Post doing reporting on this, that there was mention that he admitted to this Discord chat, people in this chat. Discord, by the way, a messaging app used by gamers, really talking about like when the next game is, essentially. This chat was used, apparently, according to officials and investigators, to sort of communicate the idea that he may have caused this crime or committed this crime. And so, Patel was asked, how many people are you investigating? And he said many. I think we have that sound for you. I want to play for you exactly how many people he's talking about. It's a lot. Listen to this.
I see the public reports that the Discord thread had as many as 20 additional users.
It's a lot more than that, and we're running them all down.
It's a lot more than 20?
Yes, sir.
And you're running all of that to ground?
Every single one.
So others could have been involved?
Yes, sir.
Now, I want to be clear, just because they are investigating more than 20 people, it doesn't mean those people are liable, had anything to do with the shooting. It's just par for the course for this investigation. They're trying to track down everything they can at this point. Hallie.
Steve Patterson live for us there in Provo, Utah. Steve, thank you for being there. Let me bring in our NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos now. Okay, Danny, we have the charges, 7 of them. The witness tampering one, as Steve points out, notable because of the way that law enforcement officials allege that he told this roommate, this partner, to stay quiet, to delete text messages. And now the pursuit of the death penalty that's officially filed, that is now officially part of this. But there is a different standard, right? There is, or I should say, an elevated standard that the prosecutors will have to prove when they get to that point. Fair?
Fair. And really, for a defense attorney like me, the only crime I'm concerned with is that lead crime, the aggravated murder, because it's the only capital crime in Utah, a state which, by the way, still has the firing squad available as a method of execution. So, yes, I mean, you're always concerned about all the charges, but realistically speaking, the only one that really matters is the capital crime. You're going to fight all of them, but that's the one that really makes the difference. And that's the one that will change this case dramatically procedurally, because you'll need not only a death penalty qualified jury, you'll need a death penalty qualified defense attorney. And there aren't all that many of them. It requires a lot of classes. I've only taken a few of mine. I haven't gotten certified yet.
Danny, let me ask you this. The protective order that was filed on behalf, or at least for Erica Kirk, is that something, Charlie Kirk's widow, is that something you might typically see in a case like this?
Yes, but in a case like this where it's a murder case, you're not always going to see that, because often a murder doesn't target people in the way that this is alleged to have done, if it's a crime of passion or a street crime. But yes, it's very common for judges to issue protective orders in crimes of violence.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much. I know you'll be staying close as we get closer to the next hearing for this suspect. Appreciate that. Also tonight, the L.A. District Attorney in the West basically praising a judge in the last hour for ruling that new evidence in the Menendez brothers' case of alleged abuse would not have changed any juror's mind when they were on trial for the murder of their parents decades ago. Listen to this.
That is how deficient, how meritless, how baseless the evidence that has been presented by the Menendez brothers has been in this habeas motion.
Here's the TLDR. Here's the bottom line on this. This means that of the paths that the Menendez brothers had, perhaps to freedom, there's only one left. This shuts one of the doors. That means there's only one left. Remember, they've been behind bars for 3 decades for killing their parents back in 1989. So this new trial, that is off the table. Parole rejected. The board denied both of the brothers parole at their first hearing last month. They could go back before the board again, maybe in 18 months. But then there's the Newsom of it all, the Gavin Newsom of it all, the California governor who could weigh in at any time, really, and potentially grant the brothers clemency. He has not indicated whether he would do that or not. Let me bring in Liz Croytz, who is joining us now. So this is not altogether shocking. I think that some legal observers had suggested that this may be how the outcome would go. But the bottom line is this, that the Menendez brothers only really have this one path to potential freedom left.
Yeah, Hallie, I mean, this was really considered the long shot path, but it still was the path that some of the family members had pointed to when they were denied their parole last month at their hearing, saying, look, we still have this habeas corpus petition that we're working through the legal system on. This would have basically been a new trial, but the judge coming out and basically smacking down their request. The brothers' attorneys had submitted 2 new pieces of evidence here. One was around testimony from Roy Rossello, a former Menudo band member who had gone on a Peacock documentary saying that he also was molested by Jose Menendez, the brother's father, who was at the time the head of RCA Records. And the other was a letter that Eric had allegedly sent to his cousin just months before the murders, in which he detailed being scared of his father. He said, quote, "I've been trying to avoid Dad. Every night I stay up thinking he might come in," referring to his father coming into his bedroom. But the judge here really slapped it down, saying the introduction of either of these 2 pieces of evidence would not have resulted in the trial court giving an imperfect self-defense instruction, because neither of these pieces of evidence demonstrate the brothers experienced a fear of imminent peril, basically saying that this is not compelling enough evidence to have changed the outcome of a jury, Hallie.
And just to be clear, when it comes to Governor Gavin Newsom, he has played his cards pretty close to the vest on this one, yeah?
Yeah, so right now they could continue to appeal to the governor for clemency, but Governor Newsom has really not indicated where he stands on this, and he certainly has not indicated that he's just going to come out tomorrow or next week and wave his wand and set them free, which he does have the power to do. If anything, he has suggested that he wants to see how this plays out in the legal process and system. So for the short term, the best chance they have would be to somehow convince Governor Newsom to grant them clemency. But in the long term, they do have that other path still with the parole process. They were denied parole their first time at a parole hearing last month, but the parole board said that they could come back before a parole board within 3 years. And if they have good behavior, basically they don't get caught using contraband cell phones over the next year, they could be back in front of a parole board within 18 months, Hallie.
Liz Kreutz, thank you very much for that reporting and for continuing to stay on top of that beat. Appreciate it. Also tonight, over on the other coast in Manhattan, a judge has dropped state terror charges against the man accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO. Yes, we're talking about Luigi Mangione. Here he is, going to show him to you leaving court. In his first appearance, he's obviously in the beige jumpsuit thing. Hasn't been in court since February, so it's first time we've seen him in months. In this written decision, the judge says Mangione was clearly hostile toward UHC and the healthcare industry in general, but that it does not mean that Mangione's goal was to intimidate and coerce a civilian population. That's the quote. You see it there. While he allegedly shot and killed CEO Brian Thompson last December in Midtown Manhattan. The judge saying that the evidence to charge him for terror just is not legally sufficient. To be clear, let me be crystal clear. This does not mean Luigi Mangione walks out of jail. It doesn't mean that he doesn't face any charges. He still faces charges, including, as you see from the Manhattan DA, second-degree murder. The Manhattan DA's office says that they respect this decision. They're going to obviously move forward with the remaining charges, and there are multiple. There's not just what he's facing in New York. There's also the Pennsylvania charges. That's where, remember, police caught him, as well as federal charges, too. All of it, as you saw this scene, both inside and outside court, with some of these supporters, they call themselves, of Mangione, gathering to essentially cheer him on. Some of them were dressed in green, the color that the Luigi character in the Mario Brothers wears, others wearing Free Luigi shirts. You see it here. I want to bring in Stephanie Gosk, who's in New York, following all of this for us.
Hey there, Hallie. So this was something I was surprised in the courtroom. We were talking amongst ourselves before the hearing began, thinking it was going to be brief and boring, and then it turned out to be anything but that. This decision was definitely a surprise. These are the most serious charges that Luigi Mangione faced in the state case against him, including a murder in the first degree, both of them connected to terrorism. That murder in the first degree would have had a mandatory sentence of life in prison with no parole. That's now been tossed out. Is he still facing serious charges? He absolutely is in that state case. 9 charges, including murder in the second degree, which carries a sentence of 25 years to life. So obviously not as bad as a mandatory life sentence, but also still very serious. He is also facing a federal case as well. And in that federal case, there is a murder count that could carry the death penalty. So why did this judge throw out the terrorism charges? Well, it's interesting because the judge in his decision said that while it certainly appears that Mangione was driven out of a hatred towards the health insurance industry, the prosecution, the judge said, did not provide sufficient evidence to show that his intent was to intimidate or coerce the civilian population. And that was really the threshold to get a terrorism charge. Where does all of this go next? Well, we still don't have trial dates for either the federal or state cases here in New York City. We do have another court date in that state case for December 1st, and they're expected to discuss a whole bunch of issues surrounding the evidence and the constitutionality of how it was acquired. Hallie?
Stephanie Gosk in New York for us. Thank you. Overseas now, with a new phase in the war in the Middle East, Israel launching its highly anticipated and highly controversial ground offensive to take over Gaza City. That has brought criticism and condemnation from the EU, from Egypt, from Jordan, from the UN, with concerns here that the assault is going to make the humanitarian crisis in Gaza even worse. I want to show you some video coming into us. Palestinians trying to get out of Gaza City, clogging the roads, but hundreds of thousands of others are staying, even after being warned repeatedly to leave, because they have nowhere else to go. It comes as an independent UN commission says Israel is committing genocide, they say, in Gaza, an allegation Israel calls distorted, false, and scandalous. Matt Bradley is joining us now from Tel Aviv.
Yeah, Hallie, it was kind of an audacious bit of diplomacy there. Right when Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, was leaving Israel, right around that same time, is when Israel launched its expanded ground offensive, taking in Gaza City, an area that it hadn't really touched with the full force of its military might until just starting this morning before dawn. Now, we've already seen around 100 people who have been killed since dawn. This, according to Palestinian health officials in the Gaza Strip, which is ruled by Hamas. But Marco Rubio headed to Doha and then onward to the UK. You know, this is a man who's trying to shore up alliances and trying to keep the connection between Israel and Qatar that had been proven so useful in the past, so important to these negotiations that now, because of what Israel did last week, now appear all but scuttled. But this ground incursion, you know, it looks as though there was no daylight between the Prime Minister and Marco Rubio when they were here in Israel. This is kind of different from what we heard from President Trump, who was at least somewhat critical of the Israeli strike against Doha. And it was that sync between Marco Rubio and Benjamin Netanyahu that really looks like it paved the way for the beginning of this offensive. The U.S. seems to back it fully. The Israeli public less so. We've been seeing protests in the streets from especially family members of those hostages who were thought to remain in the Gaza Strip. There are thought to be about 20 of them still alive. This is criticism that pales in comparison to what you just mentioned, that genocide accusation coming from a UN commission. Now, that might not change the situation on the ground anytime soon. It might not change the legal implications going forward, but will definitely, Hallie, change the conversation around what's going on in the Gaza Strip. Hallie?
Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv for us tonight. Thank you. Also tonight, we are on the verge of a pretty critical moment for the economy, with the Fed meeting today and widely expected to cut interest rates for the first time this year tomorrow. And we're already seeing some moves in anticipation of that. Tonight, mortgage rates are hitting their lowest point in 3 years. So you can get a mortgage for the lowest you can get it in the last 3 years. Still 6% plus, but it was higher than that, obviously. So the question now, will lower interest rates on mortgages, on, credit card loans, new car loans, et cetera, is all that going to be enough to jumpstart the economy? Let me bring in our Fed whisperer, Brian Chung, because, Brian, that is exactly what the Fed would hope, right? That would be the point of this kind of an interest rate cut.
Yeah, well, certainly. There's this kind of weird situation right now where inflation is rising, in part because of these tariffs, which are making things more expensive for Americans. But it's also coming at a time where the job market appears to be weakening. The pace of monthly job gains has been really substantially slowing as of the last few months. Now, normally, the Federal Reserve might look at the higher inflation and say we need to raise interest rates to get inflation to come down. But they're more concerned about what's happening in the labor market. That's the reason why the expectation is for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates by 0.25 percentage point. If they do so, that would be the first time that they've done so since the end of last year, not because of necessarily the political story, but again, because of those economic numbers that we've been receiving as of late.
And that is obviously, you mentioned the political nexus here. The Fed remaining independent has been something that some in the White House say is obviously critical. But there's also been this drama over who's sitting on the Fed board, his attempt to oust one of the governors, bringing in somebody else, et cetera. What do we need to know about that? If you're like a normal person who's just trying to go about their daily lives, like what's important to take away from this whole situation here?
Yeah, there's been this fascinating palace intrigue with the two people that you see on the screen ahead of you. On the right is Stephen Myron. He was the Trump pick for a position at the Federal Reserve. Again, these are all Senate-confirmed positions. And then on the left is Lisa Cook, who is the Biden appointee who the Trump administration is trying to push out on allegations of mortgage fraud. And here's how weird the situation was. Up until basically last night, we didn't know if either of these people would have been in that meeting, which began today, deliberating on interest rates, because it wasn't clear that the Senate was going to be able to push through Stephen Myron's appointment in time. And it wasn't clear what a judge was going to say with regards to whether or not Lisa Cook, while they deliberate the merits of these allegations of mortgage fraud, would be allowed to sit in on that meeting. Both of them were indeed confirmed by a court and by the Senate, respectively, to be at the Federal Reserve meeting, which began today. But again, none of that really changes that the expectation is still for the Fed to cut interest rates. But it does set up a very interesting political dynamic within the central bank, which many people will say is now at risk of losing some of its independence, because Stephen Myron is someone who is part of the economic team advising the president, and he did not relinquish that role as part of his new job over at the Federal Reserve. A very interesting and unprecedented situation.
I was going to say, you're following all the palace intrigue. You'll bring us more, I know. We'll see you tomorrow when we hear from Jay Powell, because he's going to maybe drop some tea leaves, right, about where he thinks the economy is headed when he speaks.
That's exactly right, and you know who's going to be dialed into that.
You better be, and then dial into us. Brian, thank you. Appreciate you. Also tonight, the head of the FBI here in Washington on Capitol Hill says as far as he's seen, he doesn't think there's any credible information that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to anybody other than himself. That's just one of the notable headlines out of Kash Patel, the director of the FBI on Capitol Hill today. He got into shouting matches with lawmakers at some points as the White House is facing more pressure to release more Epstein files. And they're facing some criticism from survivors and others over the prison transfer of Ghislaine Maxwell, who is Epstein's convicted co-conspirator. Here's an exchange on that prison transfer between Senator Adam Schiff from California and Patel.
You want the American people to believe that? Do you think they're stupid?
No. I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of inmates.
Not in the weeds.
What I am doing is protecting this country, providing historic reform, and combating the weaponization of intelligence by the likes of you. You are a political buffoon at best.
Patel obviously saying he wasn't involved in Maxwell's move. The Bureau of Prisons has not confirmed why she was transferred. This was all part of a long hearing today. There's another tomorrow on Capitol Hill, previously scheduled, that covered a variety of headlines. I want to bring in Tom Winter, who's covering all of it for us.
Well, Hallie, there were some softer sides of this hearing today before the Senate Judiciary Committee when Senator Klobuchar of Minnesota had a heartfelt discussion about what her state has been through here over the last 6 months. We had the recent targeted killings of Minnesota lawmakers, and we've also had the targeted attack at a Catholic school, at a Catholic mass, the first week of school for those school children just a couple of weeks ago. And really a moment back and forth where the FBI Director Kash Patel, who was in the hot seat today, expressed his condolences and did promise to raise Senator Klobuchar's concerns with the president about his tone recently involving some of these targeted attacks. There was that. And then there was, as you alluded to, the drama between two specific senators, Cory Booker and Adam Schiff of California. A lot of vitriol there, a lot of back and forth between the two. And Kash Patel is not somebody who, of course, is going to be sitting up there taking the incoming, if you will, from members of Congress without firing back on his own. That's just not his style, and that's not the way that it's been. Obviously, people can judge the tenor and tone of those discussions. But there was some news today and a couple of recent matters that are probably certainly worth discussing and sharing. On the most immediate front, in the shooting of Charlie Kirk, the FBI director said that there was a Discord chat room. That's a gaming platform online where apparently 20 individuals were chatting about this, including Robinson himself. And so that's something that the FBI director says they're going to be looking into. Who are those 20 people? What did they know? What did they hear? What was said? What was the discussion there? So they're going to be focusing on that. And then you knew Jeffrey Epstein was going to come up in that investigation. The FBI director today very clearly saying there were no other individuals that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked young girls to for the purposes of sexual abuse. Very definitive there, brought up the fact, this was kind of buried if you missed it, in a OPR Justice Department report about the initial investigation, talking how limited those search warrants were that were filed in the Jeffrey Epstein case as part of the investigation leading up to that plea deal that we now all know has been such a topic of controversy, pointing out that because they were so narrow, they are a little bit limited in the things that they can go back and look at from an evidence standpoint. But based on what he says he's seen, there's no evidence of any other men that these girls were trafficked to. So that was some new information today, particularly the why component of it. He'll be back in front of Congress tomorrow, in front of the House of Representatives. I'm sure there will be more fireworks then, and hopefully for all of us, a little bit more information from the FBI director as well. Hallie.
We will find out. Tom Winter, thank you. A lot more to get to here on the show, including our NBC News investigation finding a potentially dangerous flaw in Tesla's autopilot system. But we're learning about why some of the cars aren't recognizing train crossings. Plus, the suspect accused of stealing Beyoncé's unreleased music, remember that, now in custody. So what happened to the recordings? Tonight, an NBC News investigation is revealing a potentially dangerous issue with the autopilot feature on some Teslas because the technology seems to have a problem recognizing lowered gates and flashing lights on train tracks, according to some folks who have spoken with NBC News. Like, look at this picture, right? It's the stuff that comes down that tells you, hey, a train is going by, stop driving. All of it's led to a series of close calls, including one driver who shared this video showing his Tesla heading towards a moving train, forcing him to slam on the brakes right at the last second. He was paying attention, so he stopped his car. Could have been scary if that hadn't happened. Our Tom Costello talked to that Tesla owner, and believe it or not, NBC's cameras were rolling when it happened again. The drone was up. We had a photographer on the street, the car's own dash cam, all showing this moment. The driver was in there, had to brake hard to avoid going through the crossing right before a train came through. Look.
Well, there you go.
There you go. We should note Tesla did not respond to an NBC News request for comment. Let me bring in Tom Costello, who's joining us now. And this seems to be pretty specific, Tom, to the nexus, at least based on our reporting, to this issue of train track crossings, right? That thing in particular. What's going on?
Yeah, so this is when the Tesla, specifically he has a Model Y, when it is in the full safe driving mode. Now, keep in mind, Tesla and all experts say there is no such thing right now as fully autonomous driving, right? It's assisted driving. But this is an incredible package. I mean, I drove with this gentleman you saw there, and boy, the car really did seem to drive itself. But when it approaches that train intersection, the railroad intersection, the lights are flashing, the arm comes down, and suddenly it didn't stop. It didn't slow. He had to slam on the brakes. And he said it's the third time it's happened so far this year. So we've done our own research to look into, well, how widespread of a problem is this? And NBC News has identified at least 7 other individuals who say the exact same thing happened to them, and then about 40 online examples of similar mishaps or similar close calls. We reached out to Tesla. Tesla is declining to comment, or actually has not responded to our request for comment. But it is important to note that Tesla always says you cannot essentially hand over control of the vehicle to the autonomous pilot. You've got to always stay alert and be willing and able to jump in quickly and apply the brakes if necessary in any situation.
Is this on the radar of regulators yet, Tom?
Yeah, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration tells us, in fact, that it is aware of the situation. Here's what they say to us. We are aware of the incidents and have been in communication with the manufacturer, that's Tesla. The agency continuously analyzes consumer complaints to determine whether a potential vehicle safety defect trend actually exists. Here is the challenge, according to the experts, and I talked to one AI automotive expert at MIT. The software has to learn from other examples. Okay, what is a railroad stop? What does it look like? Well, there are dozens, maybe actually hundreds of examples of railroad crossings across the country. There's not one size fits all. And so that may be part of the challenge here, that the software takes a long time to learn from all the various examples around the country. But in the meantime, the advice is if you have this FSD in your Tesla, great program, by the way, but if you have it, keep your eyes on the road, especially when you come up to a railroad crossing.
Always be paying attention. Tom Costello, thank you very much for bringing us that investigation. More to come, I know, tonight over on Nightly. Appreciate that. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, President Trump is pushing back that TikTok ban again, just 24 hours ahead of when it would go into effect. Remember, the White House has announced a framework agreement with China to keep the app alive in the United States. The president says he's going to talk with Chinese President Xi Jinping Friday to, really nail down the deal. Still a lot of questions about what this deal entails, what it could change on TikTok, if anything. We'll keep you posted. Number 2, federal prosecutors are charging a former naval midshipman with sending online threats that caused that hours-long lockdown at the Naval Academy last week. This 23-year-old is accused of sending a false threat online, allegedly saying there was a gunman at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. There was not, but this led to a cadet being shot in the shoulder by mistake after somebody else thought that there was, in fact, a threat. So all of that, an update there. Number 3, probably heard by now, Robert Redford. He has died today at the age of 89. I don't care what generation you were, you know the name Robert Redford, even if you didn't watch his movies like All the President's Men, a classic, The Way We Were. You've definitely heard of the Sundance Film Festival. That was Robert Redford who did that. He was a huge advocate for film, for independent film, etc. His spokesperson says that he died at his home, surrounded by loved ones. Number 4, police have arrested the person that they think stole Beyonce's unreleased music from her choreographer's car. We told you about it when it happened, right before her first Cowboy Carter concert in Atlanta back in July. This person allegedly stole the hard drive with some of the songs on it, her set lists, took a bunch of the other stuff the choreographer had, like AirPods and a laptop, etc. Police say he's in custody now, facing theft charges. Number 5, the lineup for next year's Coachella is out. Big names, Sabrina Carpenter, Justin Bieber, Karol G. They're all set to hit the stage in April. They've all put new albums out this year. If you're interested, festival passes go on sale later this week. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And tonight, we're taking a closer look at our new NBC News investigation, analyzing data around vaccines, showing that a big portion of the United States just doesn't have that basic ground-level immunity that you need to have to try to stop the spread of deadly diseases. It's because the vaccination rates for kids around the country are backsliding. 77% of counties and jurisdictions in the U.S. have reported real drops in those rates since 2019. And that is a concern for experts. They say as fewer people get vaccinated, we're going to see more diseases, including maybe some that used to be pretty much eliminated. Think about measles, right? One window into the problem over in St. Louis, which is home to some of the country's most influential vaccine research. Back about a decade and change ago, 2010 to 2011, vaccine rates for kids in kindergarten, 92%. Flash forward, right? It is now just about 76%. Stephanie Gosk spoke to one school nurse in that city about how the landscape has changed.
How many kindergartners this year needed vaccines?
We're probably for our school around like 20% need them. We're just in a waiting phase before measles just comes and rocks the state of Missouri.
I want to bring in Erica Edwards, who has worked on the reporting for this story. She's joining us now. It's good to see you, as always, Erica. And you know, this is all about pulling back the curtain. Help us understand how NBC pulled this together, because this is super, I want to be clear, this is super data-based, right? This isn't just sort of talking to folks. This is based on the numbers. Fair?
That's right, Hallie. You know, I spent the first part of this year in West Texas, right when the measles outbreak was starting to bubble. And even though the state overall of Texas has a pretty good vaccination rate, we saw these pockets of vulnerable groups that had the ability to, create these national outbreaks because they were not protected. So our entire team came together. There was about 15 of us in NBC's Health and Medical Unit, the Medsters, we call ourselves, plus some scientists at Stanford University. We started making hundreds of calls, sending hundreds of emails to each state health department in the country, asking for their county by county vaccination data. Now, it wasn't always straightforward. Some states gather the data more, differently than the others. Some states actually declined to participate. So we had to get creative and use publicly available data to make sure that we got that county by county assessment of what was really going on. Hallie?
What's interesting here, I wonder when you talk to people about this, like I remember I covered an outbreak in California when I first started at NBC News. So this was like end of 2015, if you remember that one. And one of the things that I heard at the time a lot was that you can't, experts can't just go into communities and say, you're doing it wrong. Like you're doing a bad thing. Like that is not effective. That's not an effective strategy at helping families and communities understand the importance of vaccinations. And I know you talked to somebody who said in St. Louis, one of the nurses that we heard from who said, it's not a demand, it's a conversation. And I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit, because it feels like a really important part of this story. How much of that is like echoing in your mind as you're having these conversations?
Oh my gosh, all the time. That nurse that Stephanie talked with, Virginia Wilson in St. Louis, nurses like that are truly the ones on the front lines of this situation. Nurse Wilson has been wholly focused on getting every one of her kids at the school up to date on their vaccinations since even before the beginning of school in mid-August. She is now tasked with getting all of those kids the vaccines that they need before October 6th. When that happens, if kids are not vaccinated, or if they don't have a good excuse for not being vaccinated, they will no longer be able to attend class. So this kind of creates that very sensitive conversation that these nurses have to have with their parents, and very patiently explaining the science, not just the science, but also listening to their concerns, and then presenting them with different ideas, and just sort of making it a welcoming space where parents can come in and talk with them. Because, as we know, once you strike fear into a mom's heart, it's very difficult to extract that. So school nurses like Virginia Wilson are some of the ones who were literally on the front lines trying to combat this problem.
Erica Edwards, we're glad to have you helping us understand what goes into a reporting effort like this massive project for NBC News. Thank you for bringing that to us. Good to see you. Coming up here on the show, the incredible rescue of somebody who fell into an abandoned copper mine in Arizona. Plus, how 2 kids in Florida allegedly caused more than $50,000 in damage. Look at that, at a school, an elementary school. We got that coming up. So in just the last 90 minutes or so, we saw President Trump landing in the UK as he is now set to become the first American president ever to get 2 state visits to that country. It's because UK is going to roll out the red carpet tomorrow big time. Windsor Castle is going to host what will be the biggest military ceremony for a foreign leader in recent history. Big fancy bouquet with the royal family. There's going to be a military flyover of F-35s, both British and American. A procession in a horse-drawn carriage. This is the president in his first term on his first visit. There's going to be a lot of pageantry, obviously, but there's also going to be a lot at stake on the world stage right now. It's not even just the economic and trade deals the president and the UK prime minister could work out. That on its own is a big deal. You've also got UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer facing a lot of speculation about his own political future and whether or not he could end up pushed out. I want to get to Gabe Gutierrez, who is outside Buckingham Palace working a late night for us here tonight. Set the table, because tomorrow morning, our time, U.S. time, East Coast, West Coast, this is when things will really be rolling.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. Look, you're right. It is late here across the pond. And the president arriving here a short time ago, as you mentioned. He's spending the night in Winston House, the U.S. ambassador's residence here in London. But you're right. All the pomp and pageantry will happen tomorrow at Windsor Castle. But as you said, Prime Minister Starmer facing a lot of controversy here domestically. And also just several days ago, far-right anti-immigration protests here in London, drawing more than 100,000 people, according to police. And this all comes amid all the talk about President Trump's tariffs and also the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. But tomorrow would be a charm offensive from the royal family. President Trump, widely known to be starstruck by the royals, and King Charles and Queen Camilla will greet him at Windsor Castle. But he'll be kept largely away from the protests here in London, as well as outside the castle. Security is very high over there. And then on Thursday, the president meeting the prime minister at his country residence, Chequers, where they're expected to focus more on policy on that day, perhaps in business investments, cooperation on AI and nuclear energy. So a very high stakes meeting, as you said, historic. This is the second state visit that the President Trump is getting. Never happened before, Hallie.
All right. Gabe Gutierrez, enjoy the van ride up to Chequers. It's a little tight, a little windy, so hold on. Appreciate you, Gabe.
I bet you know.
NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Western Bureau, look at this. An Arizona rescue team pulling somebody out of this pit after he got trapped. He called 911, said, hey, I'm stuck at the bottom of this abandoned copper mine. He was hurt. He is recovering in the hospital. No word on how he ended up in that pit in the first place. Out of our Southern Bureau, 2 kids in Florida are now facing charges for allegedly causing a ton of damage at an elementary school. Look at this, like $50,000 worth of damage. There's the broken furniture. Look at the books scattered everywhere. They were 12 and 13. Apparently, they broke in during the day, police say. The 2 boys confessed after their mothers turned them in. And out of our Midwest Bureau, the wreckage of a ghost ship that sank about 140 years ago, found at the bottom of Lake Michigan. It went down after getting pummeled by 10-foot waves back in 1886. Researchers have been searching for this ship since the 70s, and they finally found it thanks to sonar technology. You see this, it's surprising the hull is relatively intact. Coming up here on the show, a lot more to get to when we come back, including more on why some people are worried about their retirement money in Rhode Island. What we know about a group of people being denied access to their own money, to their own retirement funds. That's next. To our original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight, it's the retirement nest egg for state workers in Rhode Island, including those in the sheriff's department, now calling out a huge financial institution and their employer, the state, for locking up their retirement funds. We're not talking about matched funds or money the state contributed. We're talking about money they say they themselves have put aside that they now can't get. Yasmin Vasugian talked with a couple of these law enforcement officers looking for some answers.
A growing retirement crisis, with those over 65 expected to hit a fifth of the U.S. population in the next 5 years.
Do you feel ready to retire now in this economy?
No. Millions worried about the security of their investments, whether they will have enough. And now,
it was disheartening.
The access they'll have to their savings.
At the end of the day, we put our lives on the line.
We all deserve answers.
Thousands of state employees in Rhode Island, including law enforcement, locked in retirement plans where they can't get their money. Add to that undisclosed fees. So they're sounding the alarm about the state's plans and a powerful insurance company, one of America's biggest financial institutions.
We're not getting any answers. Nothing concrete.
Sergeant Robert Gillette and Captain Jason Allaire have worked together for over 20 years after growing up together in northern Rhode Island. Now they're growing concerned about their retirement accounts.
Here at home on Wall Street today, stocks were crushed, wiping out yesterday's bounce and then some.
In the aftermath of the financial crisis, Rhode Island's pension system was on the brink of collapse. So it was overhauled in 2011 for state employees like sheriffs, ushering them into additional retirement accounts called 401As. But this year, when the two men began thinking about how they might use their 401A savings ahead of their future retirements,
we looked into it, and that's when we found out that we couldn't do anything.
Allaire was hoping to help pay for his daughter's college tuition and build out a flooring business. Gillette wanted to fund a woodworking business with his wife. They anticipated having to pay some penalties, but to their surprise,
we can't borrow against it. We can't withdraw it and transfer it to another qualified investment.
Their 401A accounts are managed by TIAA, and the state says the money cannot be accessed until they stop working, a reality facing Rhode Island's more than 40,000 state employees who hold these accounts.
I take my job seriously, and I contribute to my job every day. And the fact that I wanted to better myself and my family, and I'm being prohibited from that, it just doesn't make sense.
You've said that you feel like you're being held hostage.
Yeah. Both of us have probably close to $250,000 that is locked up in an account.
The average person knows very little about their retirement.
Chris Toby is a retirement investment expert and a former trustee of Kentucky's public pension plan.
They do not know the types of risks that they're taking in their investments, and they do not know the fees they're paying in their investments.
TIAA handles retirement plans for 5 million clients, mostly nonprofit and government workers, managing over $1 trillion, including insurance contracts known as annuities, which are not federally regulated.
Annuities flunk the most basic principle of diversification. Do not put your eggs in one basket.
And the fees are higher as well. According to an NBC News analysis, participants in the annuity, like Allaire, are paying in total an estimated $4 million to TIAA this year alone, about 20 times more than they would have paid to the lower cost provider Vanguard, which the state eliminated as an option last year. Neither TIAA nor Rhode Island would comment specifically on the higher costs. In 2021, TIAA paid $97 million to settle SEC and New York State regulators' allegations that it had pushed clients into higher cost accounts without admitting or denying those accusations. And former TIAA employees themselves filing a suit, accusing the company of pushing them into costly products that underperformed for years. The AARP Foundation saying it's joining the class action suit as co-counsel. Now, NBC News has exclusively confirmed confirmed regulators in at least 2 states, Montana and Washington, are probing allegations made against TIAA related to sales practices. A spokesman for TIAA said, in part, the company, quote, cooperates fully and transparently with all regulatory authorities and will fight the employee lawsuit. As for the Rhode Island plan, he said in a statement the company, quote, participated in the state's competitive bidding process, adding, Rhode Island makes all legally required disclosures available to participants. Ultimately, it is up to participants to decide which specific investments best suit their financial goals. A spokeswoman for the Rhode Island Treasurer's Office saying Allaire and Gillette's plan does not allow withdrawals to, quote, ensure financial security in retirement.
Why did you want to share your story?
We're fact finders, and when I couldn't get answers from my government leadership or doors were closing, it bothered me. It's my money.
We all deserve answers. It's not only about Bob and I.
Oh, it's much bigger than that.
It's much bigger.
Yasmin Vasugian, NBC News.
Our thanks to Yaz for that reporting. Coming up here, why changing our clocks twice a year may actually not be so great for our health. We're breaking down the dark side of daylight saving time next. So a new study says maybe it's not the healthiest thing for us to be switching our clocks back and forth twice a year for daylight saving time. Turns out some say it can be pretty risky. Losing an hour of sleep in March when we spring forward every year has been linked to more heart attacks and deadly car crashes. Stanford doctors now say the seasonal back and forth that we're doing now is actually the worst thing for our circadian rhythm, body's natural body clock. They say pick one. Staying on regular time and not switching at all would be our healthiest bet. I want to bring in Dr. Natalie Azar. It feels like this comes up like every single time. Members of Congress have introduced legislation about this. Like this is something that is in some ways a well-worn path, but this new study confirms what some doctors have been feeling for years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're not going to lose any sleep, see what I did there, waiting for Congress to actually enact this law, because I just think there's not going to be the political consensus. There's different economic interests. It's just going to be really tough for something like this to get past, Hallie. And yes, sticking to one time is the best bet, according to these researchers and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. It's sticking to standard time. But there are things that people can do at home. The adjustment takes a couple of days. So a few days before the switch, you want to start shifting your own bedtime. And the fourth thing right there, switching meal times. You want to switch your meal times in concert with switching your bedtime. About 15 to 20 minutes. You want to start shifting a couple of days before the big change. In certain groups, teenagers, it could take a little longer. And the biggest thing, Hallie, is to expose yourself to that natural light early in the morning and early afternoon. That's the best thing you can do to trigger our clock, that circadian rhythm.
So that's it. That list we just showed, that's our greatest possible hope then, Dr. Azar, considering, those chances, as you say, seem slim. I just wonder, so much of this is because of sort of the way we function as humans and this, man-made societal structure that we live in, I guess.
Yes. It's true, because, look, all organisms have a circadian rhythm, but what makes humans unique is that we also have exposure to artificial light. Think about that, right? So we're exposing to light. We're shutting off our melatonin. Our master clock is no longer working. So, the things we always say to people, make sure you have you get your 7 to 9 hours. Consistency is so important. We know that, having little kids, right? Having a bedtime routine, even as an adult. And if you do nothing else, please put your devices away an hour before your bedtime.
You say that, Dr. Azar. Can I ask you, do you practice what you preach? No judgment.
No. Not the screen part. Not the screen part. Not the screen part. But I do take the blue light off of my device.
Okay. That's totally fair. Because sometimes some of this stuff is easier said than done, just to acknowledge that. 100%. But it is excellent advice. We're all striving for better versions of ourselves. Yeah. Dr. Azar, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Super interesting. Glad to see you as always, and glad to have all of you with us as always here on NBC News Now on what has been a very busy day. We've got a lot more coverage coming up tonight on Top Story, and stay tuned, of course, and then more tomorrow morning on Morning News Now with Savannah Sellers and Joe Fryer. We appreciate you being with us. That is a wrap for this hour. You can watch 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on Peacock, Hulu, Pluto, YouTube, and more. I'm Hallie Jackson. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.